Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time for another episode of Finding Your Soul and Success. The one show, maybe the only show, where leaders share their inspirational wisdom with the woman who seems to know all of them, Kathy Gardarian. Hey, Kathy.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm Kathy Gardarian, and I do have a lot of really interesting people that I always like to share with you. Today, I'm thrilled to have my good friend, Essraa Nawar, and she is very, very interesting, but she's also lots of stories I can hardly wait to share with you. Essraa has been the developmental librarian. She's head of development and marketing and the chair of the Arts, Exhibits, and Events Committee at the Leathery Libraries at Chapman University since 2009. And welcome. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. I'm really excited and honored, Kathy, to be here. And I'm
Right.
honored to be one of your interesting people. I know you know a lot and you've met a lot through your life.
Well, I have to share with people how we met
Hmm.
because I absolutely love Egypt, and my dear friend here was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and I didn't know her. I've been on the board of Chapman for years and years, and I didn't meet her till later. And we were at some event, and she told me that she was Egyptian and that she was. So I told her how much I loved Egypt, and so then I said, the last time I was there, I got to go to the Alexandria Library. I said, I walked in and I had an Egyptologist with me, and I don't know what happened, but the whole energy in the place, I looked at him after maybe only 2 minutes and said, I must come and study here. So I'm telling Essraa this story. And what does she say to me? Oh, I worked there for 5 years of my life. I'm just going, wow. So you have to tell us more about how did you get to be a librarian and what does it mean to you? And I know you've done so many other things, but let's talk about that.
For sure. And actually being a librarian is probably one of the closest things to my heart, in addition to the many hats I wear at my job at Chapman University and also as a, woman in the world, a wife, a mother, a friend, a daughter, all these things. But it was such, let me start by saying it was such a serendipity that you and I connected on that Egypt part. And then
Yes.
we started working on, so many other things. And we've had so many lunches and dinners,
Yes.
and talking about various things around the world. But being a librarian has been also such a serendipity in my life. As you said gracefully, I was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and I spent most of my life in that part of the world between, the Gulf area where my dad used to work as an engineer, went back to Egypt for high school and college, and then years later I got married and my husband and I moved to the east coast of the United States. We finished our graduate degrees. He was doing his PhD, and I did my MBA. Most of my undergraduate and first graduate degree was actually in business and accounting. That
Wow.
that didn't really connect to my soul much. I think
Yeah.
part of me was really just thinking solely about I want a good job and I want to make money. But when I went back to Egypt, and it was 2005, and this is when the Library of Alexandria was actually flourishing.
Yes.
The old library was burned years and years ago.
Yeah.
But in 1999, there was this huge movement and a lot of funding that came from all over the world under the leadership of the Egyptian government, and they built this magnificent, one of a kind library.
It's so amazing there.
It is.
Did they save anything from when it was burned? I mean, what else is in there that
I
was?
mean, there's a lot of unique collections. I can't say it's very contemporary. There's a huge library of rare books and
Yeah.
special collections and archives. There's a lot of archives and special collections of famous Egyptian people and also, famous people from around the world. There's a huge Islamic section, Coptic section. There's a Jewish section as well. In fact, I helped build a little bit of that when because there are still some Jewish people that live in Egypt, and I was able to actually steward a woman that's kind of like head of the Jewish community there in Egypt that gave us one of the first tours that are actually still there in our special collections and libraries. We're also highlighting, collections of famous directors and famous, there's a Sadat Museum that was built maybe 6 or 7 years ago to honor his life.
Yeah.
A lot of his artifacts, even the suit that he was killed in, he was wearing when he was killed back in 1981. So when I went back to Egypt in 2005, the library was flourishing, and they were really looking for talents, for people that are kind of a little bit have a little bit of a global perspective. And I wasn't a librarian then. I was purely a business person, somebody that is interested in going back and doing some accounting and business work. But I started in the acquisitions department, and I fell in love with it. As I said, I think it was my first time when they recruited me. That was my first time actually being in the library. And I was just astonished, and I felt like, just like you, I'm a very spiritual person, and I follow my heart, and I felt like my heart is in this place. So I started working there and kind of moved between departments. I worked a little bit in donor relations and gifts, and I started building the collections. And for 4 or 5 years, I was just amazed with this, the role of the libraries in the society, especially the modern society.
Yes.
The role of the library back in the day, and also the library, how can it be helpful for the future generations? Fast forward a few years, my husband got recruited to be a part of the faculty members here at Chapman University, and my family and I had to move with him. My heart was really broken.
Not bad. Yeah.
Actually, that letter of resignation, it was really heartbroken to just, write it and kind of leave that position. But I knew deep inside my heart that Orange County, California, and Chapman was actually a really nice, start for us. The kids were still young, and, you and I believe in opening doors, and it was just about time for us to kind of move back to the U.S. And we did, and it was really an interesting move, and I was lucky enough that just a few weeks later at a community event at Chapman, I got to meet of the then dean of the Leathery Libraries, who just retired. Her name is Charlene Baldwin.
Right.
And her and I got into talking just like you and I, and she was, mesmerized by the fact that I worked at the Library of Alexandria. And I honestly have to say, I don't think I thought how big the Library of Alexandria is until I moved out of Egypt. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just like when we take, Hollywood for granted, or when we take Laguna Beach for granted, and then you go out and you talk to people about it, and you realize, you have these things in the backyard of your hometown. So when she knew a little bit about what I was doing, so she started me off by a volunteer position. And unfortunately, at that time, the librarianship profession in Egypt wasn't as organized as it is right now, like 10 years later, and with the amount of work that was done with the Federation of Library Association in Egypt is definitely much, much better. But I wasn't hired as a librarian. But, sure enough, the library administration at Chapman University saw a talent, and, they gave me several positions. I worked in the communications department as assistant dean for marketing communications. And then I just fell in love with the whole library system.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I started, I moved my way up. I got my leadership development certificate and master's, and then I decided to be a professional librarian. In 2017, I got my master's in library science from San Jose State University, which is really the biggest MLIS program, master's in library information sciences in the country, really. And since then, I've been doing a lot of library work. And the good thing about librarians, actually, they're also community builders. And because of I work closely with library administration, and at a place like Chapman University, very involved in the community in many ways. We started building, partnerships and relationships with the community. I started heading off a lot of diversity initiatives in the libraries and Chapman University as well. And, you and I also worked on your book signing, which was also one thing that I did that I was also dear to my heart, but I also do it with other people, authors, whether local, national, and sometimes international as well. So
there's amazing exhibits too at Chapman.
Right.
I mean, there's so much to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah.
On every floor. Yeah.
One of the things that when I started 10 or 11 years ago, and I started chairing the arts exhibits and events committee at the library, my whole vision, and it was also, very much the vision of the dean at that time, and it continues to be that way, is that we want to create a learning environment that the students kind of, organically learn something that they won't necessarily learn in the classroom. So as you mentioned, there's just a ton of exhibits. Some of them are permanent, and some of them are, rotating, that we work with local, national, or international artists. And we try just to bring events to life and exhibits that can just speak to either current topics, or sometimes we're very involved in the interfaith community in Orange County. So we have a room, for example, named after the Sikh room, the Sikh religion. We have an Italian-American room. I know you're originally Italian, so
Yes,
you'd love that. There's also stories of some of our famous professors, around, in the university itself, like the Yakir Harnov. I know he's very close to your heart yourself. He's a famous physicist. So pretty much every single part of the building tells a story. So it's been really great, and a lot of these actually activities were award-winning, through a lot of the organizations. So.
And people learn from storytelling. So,
Exactly.
it's just I think it has to be a great place to work.
It is. I'm really lucky. I was actually texting one of my team members this morning. I was sharing with her an article that was published by the American Library Association. They kind of picked the best library in each state.
Oh.
Unfortunately, our lobby is not there yet, but maybe one day soon. But I was just telling her how lucky we are to just be working at a library. I think it's really from my perspective, one of the best professions ever.
Yeah.
People don't know much about it.
Yeah.
But we're really trying to kind of spread the word and tell people that we're really community builders, and we're here for them, whatever they need.
Well, I think people have pictures of librarians, and you know how they're sometimes
Right.
portrayed in some of the older films.
Right.
You're not like that at all.
Yeah, not anymore, at least. I mean, I know some of the librarians choose to be on the quieter side, especially if you choose to. And by the way, those kind of librarians, or library staff members, or paraprofessionals, they're the backbone of the libraries. I mean, those are the people that shelf the books, and those are the people that catalog the books or work on the databases. I mean, a library won't be able to run without this kind of work.
Okay.
But there are also the front runners that are out and about and want to talk to people. So, I mean, and again, that's something that you and I always talk about. I respect all backgrounds and I respect all personalities, and that's why at a library system there's a job for every personality, and that's why we all kind of work very well with a team, and every talent and every personality is pretty much needed, whether you're front facing or back facing. The library can't really run without any of kind of both, really, in all honesty.
That's so true in all business, actually, where it just works better when everyone's doing, what they're best at, and you work as a team.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
without question.
Absolutely, 100%.
So let's see. I'd like to talk maybe about storytelling a little bit and the importance of it. And so what? Give me some of the problems maybe that you've had as a woman. And you wrote to me something that you were the first woman in something. Tell me about that, because I was too in business.
Sure.
A certain company.
Right.
So what was that like?
Yeah. I'm honored to be the first woman on this show today.
Oh yes, and she's the first woman on the show today.
I'm really excited to be that, and I think eventually we will stop saying the first woman, because we're seeing a lot of that,
Yes.
right? Like the first woman soccer player to win this, the first woman president, hopefully soon, the first, there's a lot of first, in general, but soon enough, we will be second and third, and hopefully that will be true. But back to your question about storytelling, it's something that I started. I never really thought that it's something that I'll be interested in. I think when I moved to California back in 2009, and I started doing what I'm doing and getting involved within the community, one of the things that was that, and I tell the story a lot because it's kind of it played a huge role in my whole life. The first exhibit that I was assigned to curate was an exhibit about the Jewish culture. And, coming from the Middle East, especially in Egypt, you tend to misunderstand a little bit of the Jewish culture and you mix it with politics a little bit.
Sure.
But I really was very neutral and I was really curious to know for myself. But I also wanted to prove to my team in the libraries that I'm capable of doing anything. So I started co-curating the exhibit, and I fell in love with the culture and, with the woman that was, actually loaning some of the materials. And, after the huge success that the exhibit actually got, that day after the event, one person came up to me and said, "This is just, mind blowing. You're a Muslim woman working at a university like Chapman University, which is pretty much non-denominational now, but, was established, by the Disciples of Christ Church back in the 1800s, curating a Jewish exhibit. And this day really changed my life." And I said,
really?
it really did, because it kind of prompted me to actually tell my story and tell people why I do what I do, and also break the stereotype. And I think that was really my major, role or goal in actually starting to tell the story. And literally that day, Kathy, I went back home and I wrote my first ever article. I wrote the whole thing. I did not sleep. I said the story about the Jewish exhibit, about what happened and what I learned, and that whole, quote. I can't even remember the guy that told me that, but I remember the moment. And next day I sent and I didn't know what to do with it, right? I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I slept, and I told my husband, and he said, "Oh, this is great. You need to publish this." And I talked to one of our media people at Chapman, and she said, "Can you send me your picture and bio?" And I said, "Sure." And then maybe a couple days later, it was published in the Orange County Register.
Isn't that great?
Right. And, speaking about the power of storytelling, and just a week later, a rabbi at a Jewish temple down in Laguna Woods called me in my office, and he said, "I read your article." And a ton of people also did. I mean, some people emailed and some people sent letters and all that stuff. And he called me and said, "Can you come and speak at our temple?" And of course I was shaking. I mean, I never spoke publicly. It was a Jewish temple, and I've never been to a Jewish temple. And it was just, it was that moment that I'm like, okay, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone.
That's
and I
great.
really need to do it.
And we all need to do that always.
Exactly.
I'd like to take just a short commercial break, and we will be right back.
And just a reminder that our host, Kathy Gardarian, has a book out called Feet to the Fire, Finding My Soul and Success, and it's something special. In this transformational memoir, Kathy shares her inspiring stories about how she found her own soul while climbing the corporate ladder. Relying on open-hearted love as her primary motivational tool, Kathy defied the traditional male business structure to become founder and CEO of her own company, Qualis International, multi-million-dollar sales and distribution company with clients like Home Depot and 7-Eleven. Within these pages, Kathy emboldens readers to bravely hold their own feet to the fire while giving them the tools necessary to achieve deep, meaningful change in the midst of discomfort. With humility, humor, wisdom, and warmth, Kathy offers an alternative path to prosperity using feminine principles that will empower women everywhere. As Deepak Chopra put it, Feet to the Fire is for anyone interested in true success. Using her own story as an example, Kathy offers useful, accessible tools for transformation, combining business with self-awareness. Simply visit feettothefires.com. That's feettothefires, plural.com.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about change, because I think we all come from some part of, we have a belief system about something, and yet there's doors that open and we just absolutely have to change. And so sounds like your public speaking was one of them. Tell me more about what you think is important about change.
I mean, if you come to my office, and I think you've been there a couple of times, you'd notice a big quote on my billboard with the quote says, I think the first name of the author is Robert, I can't remember his last name, afraid of change, then fail.
Oh,
So if you resist change or if you're afraid of change, it it's not a good sign. Whether it's in business, whether it's in career, whether in how to raise kids. You know, I have two teenage boys. One of them who just started college at the United States Air Force Academy, and that was a huge change.
wow. Yeah.
And it was really hard for me as a mother to kind of take that change.
Sure.
But I also don't want to be one of those parents that will hinder their kids' success. So change is part of life, and my life is we explained it just briefly, has been just a roller coaster of change, whether it's travel, living in different cultures, living in different countries, even states, meeting different people, and also different professions and different career paths that I've had through the last 20 plus years in my life, even changing direction. I graduated with a business degree. I got my master's, my MBA, and then my master's in leadership development, and then I ended up being a librarian. Those are all experiences that have added to who I am.
Yeah.
That's why I never resisted any of them.
Yeah.
And that's why serendipity is definitely a huge piece of what I believe in, because change is also part of the serendipity. I mean, you just have to open those doors. And if you resist the change, sometimes change is not good. I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware of the book Who Moved My Cheese. It's a famous book.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That we got to read as part of the leadership program at Chapman University. And it was kind of one of those books that changed my life and my perspective. Change in organizations, change in organization structures. I was talking to you earlier, as we were writing here, there's a change in leadership of the Leathery Libraries, but we're also excited. There's a huge project that we're working on, which is the Library of the Future. That's also a big change, but for the most part, change is good. It's very uncomfortable,
I
but
was just going to say that is, there's the saying, whatever you resist persists.
right.
So sometimes if you don't change, you look and see, what fallout comes from that as
Right.
well.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think the most important thing, Kathy, is to actually acknowledge that you're changing. Like in relationships, my husband and I are going to be celebrating our 20th anniversary in
Congratulations.
next summer. Thank you. And we're already thinking about where to go and all that stuff. But as I look at myself, even before I look at him, we're not the same people that we got married, 20 years
not.
ago. We're totally different, but we changed together. But I think the most important thing in a relationship, whether it's a working relationship, whether it's, a marriage or a partnership, you have to just acknowledge the fact that you're changing as a person, and to be able to kind of respect that kind of change and sometimes just work around it, right?
Sure.
Because we're human beings and we will continue to change. And I think resisting the change, unfortunately, some people tend to resist the change. And I'm not saying they end up failing, but they end up not really staying. They stay in their comfort zone. And
I think there's more struggle around it too.
Right.
When eventually you have to find a way, because it seems like the only thing certain in life is change.
Absolutely. I mean, and with the technological life we're living in, with that century of there's technologies changing all the time, and this new generation, as we call it, Generation Z, which is my little daughter and also the younger millennials as well. I mean, things are changing for them, every moment. So even the way they're being educated, especially in the age of COVID, I think a lot of people got comfortable with the online education, for example.
Yeah.
And the whole higher education and also how businesses also do work is changing. I mean, this whole work from home, thing that we all kind of got used to it. So that was a huge change that was really forced on us. And some people really struggled because they're not, they can't really adapt to something new. So, yeah.
Well, we are social beings and we need to get out in the world, and
For
you
sure.
also learn from being around other people.
100%.
So you can get out of your own head and only your own belief systems that you
For
think
sure.
is the only way to be.
Right. And that actually brings us to something very cool that you and I talked about last week as we were preparing, which is that concept of unlearning, if you want me to touch
Yes,
base on
yeah.
that a little bit.
Yes, do that.
And I think change, leads us to unlearn some of the things. And I shared with you that I'm writing the article about the power of unlearning. Hopefully
yes.
I'll be able to finish it in the next few weeks before, maybe the end of October or something, and I'm going to share it with you.
Okay.
And it's very important to actually acknowledge that as you're changing, you have to unlearn some of the things that you learned and took for granted, whether, things that were, given to you as part of your a religious belief or social norm or cultural norms, and you go into a different country or different culture, or you travel and you feel like you're being challenged, right? Like the things that you used to believe in so much, you don't anymore, and vice versa, right? So I think change and unlearning kind of go hand in hand, to be honest.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm redoing my house after 20 years, and sometimes I look at even my choices. I'm definitely a different person than,
Absolutely.
and you just see it everywhere. But
For sure.
it's so good to empower your own soul and what it really calls to do next. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what is there anything that keeps you up at night that you really worry about?
I mean, I think that's probably the answer you'll get from any mother, probably your kids. I'm thankful to have a husband that's very supportive. So we work hand in hand as a team, whether on our kids' academics, athletic life, their food. He helps around the house. He's
great.
the great cook in the world, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, he does great food. So that kind of calms me down because he centers me
Yeah.
for the most part, and I hope I do the same for him. So I can't say that it keeps me up at night, but that's probably the most thing that worries
Yeah.
me the most. Everything has to be. I mean, I'm grateful for the fact that my kids also understand the fact that my husband and I also cherish our alone time, and we cherish the fact that we need to spend time together or travel alone. And they got to the point in their life that they actually understand that, and they see how important it is for us.
Yeah.
But that's probably, the most important thing in our life now as we get those kids to college
Yep.
and,
It's a big
starting their life.
responsibility.
It is, yeah, we have 3 kids, and I think that's probably the most important thing on our minds right now.
Well, I think the children are lucky to have both of you.
I appreciate
because I
it,
know
yeah.
you both so well.
Yeah, they're great kids.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have them too.
So, what is one of your favorite quotes, and why is it important to you? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at down here in my phone because I don't know it on top of my head, but
Okay.
I know
Good.
it's actually there on again one of those quotes that I have on my billboard. It's for Rumi, and I know
I
you
love Rumi, yeah.
Rumi too, and who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Rumi has always been my favorite. I love his like his Sufi mystic,
But he's so
mysterious.
authentic, too.
He is very
Yeah.
authentic. I love the fact that he talks to an upper divine, but at the same time, he's very accessible to just everyone. Everybody relates to Rumi's quotes, no matter what your background is.
Yes.
You won't even believe how many people, that I met throughout my life and travel and speaking engagements that their favorite author or poet or, quote person is Rumi. And I came across this quote maybe 2 or 3 years ago, which is this being human. I'm going to just read it to you, and I'm going
Okay.
to explain where I like it.
Okay.
So this being human is a guest house. Every morning is a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Treat each guest honorably. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has sent as a guide from beyond. And I love that so much because it explains so well what life is all about, right? And it doesn't just paint a rosy picture that you only have, because I are pretty positive people, or we try, but at the same time we can't really lie and say every single day is positive and every single day we don't have struggles. I mean, life is
Right.
full of struggles, it's full of up and downs, it's full of getting upset at the kids for not finishing their homework, and also some moments that are like giving birth to your kid. That's probably the most precious moment in anyone's life. So just invite all. I think just acknowledging the feeling is something that I love so much about that quote.
But it sounds like, gosh, you really have to invite them all in,
Right.
But because one of my favorite quotes is still, everything is what it is, and then it'll be what you make it.
Right.
And I say that to myself every day.
Right.
When something happens that I'm not real happy about or I'm questioning, I will say, okay, this is what it is. So now, how are you going to handle it?
Right.
But I would say that sometimes I have learned that maybe I could have handled something in a better way
Right.
if it was something that was more confrontational. So it's an interesting quote. I'm glad you brought it up.
Right. I love it. There's also
Yeah.
a podcast on, somewhere, out in the cloud
Yeah.
with the same name that I've been enjoying.
Oh, great.
Also talking about very similar contexts. And this is when I got introduced to the quote and kind of like
great.
that specific way of thinking as well. And I think, mentioning that you could have handled it, in another way.
Yes.
And I kept telling myself this as well throughout the years. But when I read this quote, I started to acknowledge, why am I upset? And I think that's
Yeah.
the thing. It's
Yeah.
not inviting you to continue to remain upset. It's
Right.
inviting you to actually get a handle on why you're upset, invite that feeling, and then think about how you can handle it. And
Right.
that's kind of where I am coming from and kind of falling in love with that specific quote.
That's great. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Well, my dear, how can people reach you?
Just a simple Google Essra Nawar. My name is written, I think, probably here, ESSRAA, and then last name Nawar. You can reach me on pretty much most of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They can also email me directly at my Chapman email, which is accessible at the Leathery Libraries website, nawar@chapman.edu, if there's an interesting project that they're looking into working on. I also wanted just to mention this briefly. I have a TED Talk that I did back in 2016 that's also online on YouTube, if they're interested in kind of listening a little bit about my take on diversity, a little bit of change, and also changing the narrative. I think that will be interesting for them. I'd love to hear
That's
from
great.
people. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, but thank you.
You are so wonderful. So
Appreciate it.
I just want to let you know that I'd like to have you back sometime when down the line, and we'll talk more about things. And I know you're off to Egypt. I'm quite jealous. She's going to do a presentation again at the Alexandria Library. So
I promised you, we will make it happen. I think we're already working behind the
We're
scenes
working on a
hopefully
trip.
a
We have to
trip.
go.
And just because we're talking about Egypt, just really briefly before we kind of part. So next week we're working. I'll be at the Library of Alexandria for
Right.
a couple of speaking engagements, and my husband also is giving a keynote at as the University of Alexandria is graduating 500 of the African students. So I'm really
Oh.
proud of him to kind of be part of that,
That's wonderful.
wonderful celebration. But also in February of 2022, that's also kind of just for the public. If anyone is interested in going to Egypt through the House of Worship Tour and the Orange County Interfaith Network, we're taking an interfaith trip to Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. And I
Wow.
happen to be one of the leaders as well, along with
Oh,
other
I didn't
couple
know that.
people
Okay.
as well. We've done one in 2018 and it was extremely successful. Kind of bring people together, look at all these sites from a historical and touristic perspective, but then there's an interfaith conversation attached to it too, and we get to meet really, a lot of
It's
interesting
very
people.
helpful today.
Yeah, for sure.
that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if anyone wants to join, I think we still have maybe 5 or 6 more spots to fill. So just
Right.
reach out to me and I'm happy to kind of hook you up with the organizer.
Thank you so much for coming today, Essra.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, another great episode of Finding Your Soul and Success. Leaders sharing their inspirational wisdom with our host, Kathy Gardarian. And for more on Kathy's work or her book, by all means, check out the site, feettothefires.com. That's feettothefiresplural.com. Thank you for joining us here on OC Talk Radio.